Today, we are going to talk about imposter syndrome and how it can hold you back from writing your resume and going to interviews. In fact, the biggest blocker, and I've worked with so many clients, hundreds of them, and every time we work on the resume or we work on the interviews, the biggest blocker is imposter syndrome, believing that their experience is not good enough, undervaluing it, thinking that, oh, I didn't really do anything special. And this is why I spent a lot of time trying to understand imposter syndrome better. The thing is, I know I have imposter syndrome. I know that I've suffered from it. I know, from time to time, it gets in the way. And let me just explain to you the different types or the different signs, of imposter syndrome. So tell me if you belong to one of these categories. The perfectionist. Oh my goodness. What does the perfectionist do? You demand perfection in every aspect of your life, yet you know that perfectionism isn't always a realistic goal and you can't meet the standards. You feel ashamed or like a failure if there is the smallest mistake in anything that you do. I see that a lot with my UX designers when it comes to their portfolio. They really, really, really want their portfolio to be perfect before they even apply for jobs. And that holds them back because it's never going to be perfect, ever. So, that also happens when you are trying to figure out what to put in your resume or when you're trying to figure out what stories to tell in your interviews. You get into this rabbit hole of trying to perfect the content. And when you do that, you're just stuck. Everything from your perspective is ordinary or not perfect. Well, you know what? I hate to break it to you, but the job postings are ordinary. You are supposed to do ordinary things because if you are doing things that are different from what the job posting is asking you to do, then you're not a fit. Okay, they're not looking for people who build rockets. They're looking for people who do the things that are within that job category that everyone else does. So it is actually a good thing that your experiences are ordinary. And then I want to talk about what I call the natural genius. So if what you do comes to you easily, then you are classified as a natural genius because you believe that because um, things came to you easily, there must be something wrong with you, and you feel embarrassed and ashamed because of that. You are ashamed of failing because you feel that you are just not good enough when you have difficulty with picking up new skills. So people who are what I classify as a natural genius, they're just used to new skills coming to them with little effort. And so when you go through a change or learn a new thing and it doesn't come to you naturally, you start thinking that, oh my God, there must be something wrong with me because you're not used to it. And that creates imposter syndrome. So when you are doing something that is not natural to you, like, resume, because you've never been taught to do this in school, or interviewing, for the first time, or interviewing for a company that you've never interviewed for before. I have clients, for example, that are not used to interviewing for companies like Amazon or Microsoft. And when we work on this together, their amygdala, the tiny part of their brain, that's responsible for the fight or flight, it just gets triggered and they panic. So, yeah, in the tech sector, sometimes they are looking for Avengers. No, Wallen, we need to showcase a lot of skills so that we can get the resume picked up. Well, thank you for, sharing that. And, I wonder okay, so just because they have that wish list doesn't mean that they're going to they will not make an exception that you don't meet every aspect of that wish list. And I wonder if some of it is we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to meet that, checklist, and we feel like if we don't meet it, that's the problem. But truly, what the problem may be is that maybe the content that we provided for some of those things in the checklist were not deep enough. We're not in enough detail. I experience that a lot with my clients where they'll just provide the surface level of their experience. They'll tell me a story of something that happened, like let's say a relocation to another store. And I'm just like, that's it? That's all that happened? There's got to be more to that. There's got to be a lot more to a relocation to a store. Relocation to a store, it involves like, moving a whole bunch of people. That requires a lot of communication skills. That requires some kind of strategy or a plan so that the work doesn't get disrupted during the relocation. What about all the equipment? What about all the tech that's involved with the relocation? Was there a system used? Was there a CRM system that's used in order to ensure that all the customer information gets relocated? There's just a lot to it. And I think because we take things for granted, because we take what we do for granted, we forget all of the little pieces that were involved. And I invite you, Ahmed, to shift your thinking away from just dumping a whole bunch of skills that's in the resume to, or sorry, that's the job posting into your resume, to thinking about stories. When we think about our experiences as stories, we're going to be able to talk about, more, the larger impact of what we've done. And I'll give you an example. I was with my coach in New York, and we were just talking about the things I do, with my clients. And she asked me, like, how do you help your clients? And I said, well, we identify their ideal job, and then we redo their branding and alignment with this ideal job, and I help them with their interview. And she looks at me and she says, that's not all you do. There's more to it. You're changing people's lives. You're helping them get higher pay, which allows them financial freedom, which impacts their mental health, which allows them to support their families. That is what you're doing. So I invite you to ask yourself, okay, this project that I did, what kind of win did it create for the organization, right? What was the problem that it solved? That's what I invite you to do, because if you see it that way, it is going to wow the recruiters, and it is going to help them see you as a leader and more than just some person who just fulfilled their checklist. And then they are going to overlook that you didn't meet every aspect of the checklist. Okay, so the other cause of imposter syndrome is when you are the expert. So people who are the expert, they want to learn every single thing about a topic, and they spend so much time, getting information that they end up devoting more time than they need to. And so if they don't have all of the answers, then they feel like they're a fraud. And that's a problem because no one knows all the answers. So I'm very curious to know if anyone here identifies as an expert. And you may want to be careful about that if you are, and remind yourself that you don't need to know all of the answers. And so to the point about the job posting, you don't need to know all the answers. Employers don't necessarily expect you to know all the answers. I don't know anyone who started a new job and knew everything that's involved in a job. So just something to remember. Bye. Okay, so I have a little tip for you in terms of eliciting your memory when it comes to stories. a lot of my clients find this useful, and it's through my interview flashcards. So here's one of my interview flashcards, and I want to show this to you because it's a big game changer. So I have little, basically cues that help you identify stories that you've done on the job in order for you to write your resume, in order for you to write your interview stories. So here is one of the flashcards, and I did this exercise with my clients in one of my group sessions where I showed them this flashcard and I asked them to, I set a timer of 5 minutes and I asked them to brainstorm as many stories as possible where they've wowed a client. So many of you here have definitely worked with a client, right? So think of a story where you worked with a client on a project and you went above and beyond. And when you think about the story, I want you to remember where you were, who was the client, and what problem did the client solve? And then ask yourself, what was standing in the way of achieving success for the client? And then what you could do is, after you brainstorm a whole bunch of stories, after the 5 minutes is over, then you can flesh out these stories, right? So in 5 minutes, what you want to do is think of as many stories as possible, whether it's in one job or multiple jobs, where you've wowed a client. And once you do that, you can go back and flesh out the story and then ask yourself, well, where was I? Who was the client? What was the client's problem? What was standing in my way to help this client? What are 3 things I did to solve the client's problem? And those 3 things should really align to what's in the job posting. So let me give you an example of that. So I am going to look up, let's see, a product manager job posting. And I'm going to share my screen here. So let me share my screen. So this is a product manager job posting, and some of the responsibilities within that role is to influence and lead in the organization, collaborate with cross-functional teams, lead ongoing workshops, organize and manage teams of developers, advocate for customers and products, spend time with customers to develop a deep empathy for the challenges of small businesses. So guess what? This is all about wowing the client. So I didn't make this up. I have a collection of flashcards that basically address most of what are in job postings and most of what employers look for. There are basically themes of what employers look for. And so advocating for customers, right? Think of a time where you advocated for a customer, i.e., wowed a client. And when you talk about how you did that, you can incorporate some of the things that they're looking for, like being an excellent communicator, using data to help maybe the customer understand or to even advocate for the customer, synthesizing their needs, right, in order to advocate for them. And by doing so, perhaps you wowed the client because you had their back. So do you see how you can use these flashcards to really think of stories and brainstorm them? It is a very, very helpful tool because sometimes we just need some ideas to spark our memory. And remember, don't feel like your experiences need to be, how do I say this, like building a rocket ship. They are day-to-day projects, events, as long as you have created some kind of tangible result, then you can use it in your resume, you can use it in your interview. And at the end of the day, I want you to ask yourself, this project that I did, I created a change, and how did that change benefit the organization? And when you ask yourself that question, you realize the significance of what you've done. Okay, so back to the story of my client who relocated to a new store. The new store was actually double the size of the old one. And so when she asked herself, well, why was this important? Why is this a good thing for customers? You have double the space. That means it's going to resolve overcrowding. That means it's going to create a great customer experience. There's a potential for doubling the revenue because now you have more capacity to have customers. So always ask yourself these thoughtful questions around, why was this an important project? What is the change that I made, and how did this change create a benefit for my team, for customers, for the product, for the business? And when you do that, you're going to be able to remember things that you've done and have powerful stories that you can talk about in your resume and your interview. So I am holding a session on Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern. If you are interested in this topic that I'm going to dig deeper into, I recommend that you attend. You can comment, like this post, and I will make sure that we get you the invite. Thank you so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful Thursday.